the amendment to extend the temporary mandatory face coverings bylaw. We have a number of speakers, and as far as I understand, perhaps some speakers have been added over the break. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? To S. Peterson.
So we're going to devote this.
S. Peterson.
Including in the election, the ongoing election in the United States, because a lot of the mess there has to do with coronavirus, trying to change the laws to accommodate coronavirus, creating great big openings for cheating, which did happen. So it's a big theme. 2020 has been an amazing year, but we're going to focus primarily on the issue of masking and children, and especially masking and schools. And this is a very delicate issue. You've got 4 questions here that you've come up with. Can you just go through those questions?
Certainly. We're thinking about the psychological, how it affects the kids psychologically, the whole area of wearing a mask, and how it might affect their picking up on their reading skills, how it's safety issues. Do we see any safety issues with wearing a mask? And so will this affect kids' bonding or connections with people within the school system, with at home? And so we're dealing with these areas of stress right now that our children are working through with masks.
Yes. So Rita, you'd be in the best position to address this with the knowledge of your time teaching in phys ed, and there's special issues that arise when people do physical education, exert themselves physically with masks on, which deprives people of oxygen. And you've also done special education, which is another, I think, very interesting perspective on all of this, because we're kind of doing this one-size-fits-all approach, but we're humans and we're idiosyncratic and we're all kinds of different organisms and have different attributes and whatnot. So welcome and thanks for coming in, and take it away.
Well, I am coming from the perspective of a retired teacher. I retired over 10 years ago, and so I personally have not been in the schools since 2015. So I have not been in to see what is actually happening in the schools, but I have been talking to parents, I've talked to students, and I've talked to some retired teachers also, and they all have concerns about the masking in the schools. It concerns me that there is a mandate to, for example, in phys ed, to mandate that children that are in phys ed classes, indoor phys ed classes, should not be wearing masks. And that would apply to outdoors too. Outdoors is fresh air, and which children need so much these days. And I'm concerned that different schools have different protocols, and I am not an expert in that at all. Just knowing from what parents are saying that they are concerned that their students are not being able to, for example, watch what their teachers are talking about because of the masking. In the lower grades, especially kindergarten to grade 3, grade 4 even, students actually need to see that teacher's mouth and the expression that the teacher has in order to experience all aspects of the curriculum.
When you think of what are we as human beings, what are we as biological creatures, as organisms. Like for mammals, our faces are, so much of the nervous system is there, so much, our hair is there, our speaking capacity, our capacity of articulation to cover up this instrument of our articulation, the mouth, and then just go by the ears, but not be able to see how the sounds are being formed, especially when you're just learning phonetics.
Yes.
Yes. Here's the idea of a picture for not a thing but for a sound, an S,
Right.
a b, and then here's the picture of b. Like to just say that you're going to cover up the face with all the subtleties of not only learning from the teacher, but learning with your peers, with people your own age, how to deal with emotions, when to see the signs that emotions might be going in a certain direction. All these kind of things are tremendously central to our formation. It's hard enough with adults, but with children. Now, Larry Farquharson in a school in London, Ontario, he has called, and he's in the Saddle Teacher, he says face masks are egregious and unforgivable form of child abuse. So I've heard this phrase, child abuse, and physically assault. It's like a physical assault of children. So that's an extreme statement. Do you think that's going too far?
No, I don't think that's going too far. I know parents are trying to make up for some of the things that they're not getting at school because they unmask it when they get home, and concerned parents are actually starting to help their little ones, especially the little ones. It's so important. Grade 1, for example, grade 1 is kindergarten grade 1 are two of the most important grades in the whole system. That's where everything starts. That's where the children get to love school, and they want to learn, and they want to learn more all the time, but they're missing out on their socialization also. It's so important to get person to person, one-on-one with the teacher whenever they get a chance. And group activities are so important. When I taught even in regular classrooms, we used to get together and collaborate and in teams and work together and physically, make things together. Well, are they doing that now? It is so important. I'm afraid for the future of the children because they're not getting, for example, what I was able to give the children, tactile, sensory. The little children, they're not getting that sensory. I don't know.
I'm not sure I understand what's preventing them from getting tactile information.
Well, they can't go in groups unless they're masking, I guess if they're social distancing, hopefully the teacher is going to be letting them go without a mask so that they can talk to each other freely. That's tactile. A lot of the classrooms, I am feeling, do not have enough room because of the social distancing to have everything in the classrooms like we used to have for all the tactile information because they have to be how far apart? 6 feet apart. And in a classroom, there's just not a lot of room if you're 6 feet apart. So I would, in my classrooms, I would have a lot of different materials around so the children would be able to experience. Well, where are they keeping that material now? It's not in the classroom. I feel that the classrooms and the teachers are feeling that too, that they can't deliver programs like they used to be able to do, to bring all of their sensory material in there. That's,
Do you have a sense that there's any justification at all for masking children?
if someone is sick, the normal thing, the common sense thing would be to keep your child at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the healthy children, I don't think there's any need for masking at all with healthy children at all, or teachers.
Or adults.
Yes.
Right. No.
There's an enormous literature on this subject, and it's very interesting. Recently, the most recent study was published in a journal in Denmark. They had 6,000 people masked. They followed them. They had 6,000 people in total, half masked and half not masked. They followed them for a month and found no real difference between the outcome of those masked and those not masked. One was 1.8 percentage supposedly got the coronavirus. However, the testing for coronavirus, the PCR testing is not accurate. It doesn't, to get a positive test doesn't mean you're actually infected or a case in any way. We're full of all kinds of viruses.
Thousands.
We're asymptomatic, you could say, on all these viruses.
Yes.
Some of them could hurt us, but they don't. We're asymptomatic all the time with organisms that live within us that don't hurt us. And they're not able to identify which are, how the positive cases, what they are, and how they transform, or the positive outcomes, how they transform into cases. And yet we see on our papers every day cases rising, quickly rising in an alarming fashion, but they don't report, no, the deaths have fallen off. And so you can test and produce as many cases as you want. There seems to be this desire for lockdowns. It just seems to be built into certain government figures. They just sort of are rendered uneasy, uncomfortable unless they can lock us down. So with children, they do they get infected at all? Do they, there's almost no cases of any children dying of it. I'm not aware of any case. They seem that they would be the innocent ones, and yet they're probably being the most masked in school, the most number of hours, and the most kind of arbitrary rule that whatever their teacher says, about, oh no, somebody has an inhaler. I'm wearing the mask and I have this inhaler, and what should I do? And the teacher just arbitrarily decides, oh, you need the mask more than anyone, which isn't true. So it creates this whole strange environment where a new form of power is given, sort of totalitarian power is given to teachers over students, who can't, who have no standing. They can't really stand up for themselves.
Areas of adaptation for these kids are just, it's very hard for the disabled to adapt as much as readily as the other groups of people, and they have they're being treated like biohazards. Everything is amplified to what they dealt with before, and structurally there's a lot of adjustments for kids that are,
and not just younger children too, in the high schools and middle schools. Some children, are thriving at home, learning on the screen, but those children are individuals, and a lot of, no, I shouldn't say a lot. I have heard that there are senior students that love to be social, and they are finding that when they went to school, they have to sit by themselves on the screen at school, and they're not allowed to talk to other students, and have opted to go home to do homeschooling because they're not happy. They're not
Yeah,
happy.
there's no
and-
benefit with feedback, is there?
No. But again, I haven't been in the schools to be able to prove this. I've just had parental feedback and student feedback that I've talked to.
Well, one of the problems with wearing masks, well, you don't get oxygen as much. Carbon dioxide comes out and sort of builds up. But the bacteria, as you exhale, can build up inside the mask, and you can have cultures of bacteria that give you rashes, that give you respiratory illnesses, that give you, coughing and sinuses and different kinds of ailments. Many teachers observe, boy, that these students are lethargic. They're grumpy. It's not good to deprive, especially young people, of
brains.
Yes.
oxygen to the brain and oxygen to all our organs.
Blood.
Yes, yeah, and there's a study in the New England Medical Journal, and in this particular study, was on Nuxus newsfeed.com. They pretty much verified what you said. Psychological effects of breathing are elevated, CO2 levels are higher, visual performances are affected, exercise endurance, headaches, and COPD conditions it's all enhanced. Psychological effects, decreased reasoning, alertness, irritability, and even with the severe breathing, there's headaches, dizziness, perspiration, even short-term memory loss. And that's in a learning environment.
And we don't know what the long-term effects are
Right.
going to be.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
what scares me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, another aspect of this, Rita, is you've been saying, you know teachers currently in the system, parents, and I met a family member of yours in grade 6 who apparently is getting a mask during phys ed. But of course, people are made to feel very fearful about talking about this. Like, would it be possible to have some teachers experiencing this, watching this, taking part in this, overseeing this in their classrooms? Why shouldn't they be able to talk in public
Right.
about what should be done, about public policy in this area? I mean, part of this, the fear factor that is generated, that people are made to feel, boy, maybe I better not talk about this. My employer might not like it. The government might find out. The police might monitor me. I might be, end up in one of these camps for being non-compliant. I don't want the reputation to be, non-compliant. This is a terrible assault on our democracy, on the milieu where we live, where when people feel we can't discuss the most basic things, things that, that we haven't been down this road before. It's not obvious how to do it. People have all kinds of opinions. In order to do the best case, we need to hear vigorous debates among people with different perspectives. And it seems that this can't happen in this situation. Am I off base here?
They're being silenced because of fear of losing their jobs in every situation. Teachers, assistants, in everyday businesses.
This must be the
How's
kind of
that?
atmosphere that maybe was in the Soviet Union, that was in East Germany, the idea that there's some kind of a watchful, spying, prying eye, some sort of master police entity that is keeping an eye on us.
Yeah, there's the critical thinking is gone in terms of a lot of things because we can't work from examples. We can't create our own kind of scientific situation where we have the feedback of groups and ideas, and so creative thinking is gone, critical thinking is gone, And in terms of the health and the psychological, it's there's depression within the children. It hasn't been higher, and they actually have lines for children, and they're supposed to have within these lines of phoning lines. They have never been busier. That's what we're dealing with as a community. So these kids are not, they're not given their, and if they talk to their parents, if they address things in a fashion where they're vilified, and they are the biohazard, and they are the one child who's why aren't you coming along with us? And then they're frustrated because it isn't functioning. There's been there are examples of children fainting. There is examples of
And
it.
dying in Germany, in
Yes.
China.
And China, yeah.
Yes, Boho Schaffman, yes. Dr. Boho Schaffman in Germany spoke on behalf of 3 children in this instance, and a 6-year-old and 2 13-year-olds. And these people, it's being hidden. It's being taken off YouTube. There again, the vilification of these people, and then the erasing of them on
When you
YouTube.
say these people, many of these people are professional people with advanced degrees, with publications, well-known experts in their field, and we haven't seen this before. For
100%.
some unknown entity to decide that this expert in his or her field must be censored and is not allowed to speak on an issue is essentially, the common phrase always used is conspiracy theorists. Never mind that the person censoring the person, has this much knowledge of the subject, and the person being censored has this much knowledge on the subject. And this hasn't happened before. The internet is being reconfigured. Like, students can't grow up using the internet properly, doing real searches. When you talk about critical thinking, darn right, the whole system seems to have turned against the idea of individuals being encouraged to have independent thought, to research things for themselves, to argue their case even if it seems unpopular at the time, or doesn't conform with what the authorities are telling us that we must believe. These medical health officers like Tinshaw in Alberta, this is a misappropriation of power to individuals. Who are they getting their advice from? Bring the people on television who they're getting their advice from. Let's see on television some debate between other experts who disagree with the authorities that are giving these health officers their information. It's being covered up from us. We're not being treated with respect. We're not being treated as adults. We're being treated like children, actually.
Yes.
And the treatment of children is sort of a metaphor.
Yeah, it's the government officials. They seem like they're picked and preened exclusively with the same train of thought, because we're not seeing any variations. And we are seeing that the service that the government is supposed to have towards us is no longer existing, and we are to serve the government. And it is, in my view of what I've seen in Canada, this hasn't existed to the level it is existing ever now. Yeah.
And we talk about all these cases of fascism and communism in the past. It's getting worse right now, right here. The mind control, the fear. There is established techniques for psychological warfare to cause people to be traumatized, to manipulate them into doing or not doing certain things through the exploitation of fear and a certain amount of disinformation.
And so you give this to a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old child who is just stepping out for the first time in their life, outside of their home, in a community, in a setting as in a classroom, and even well-meaning teachers, because they have mandates and they're stressed out. I mean, we have provincial mandates, and some of them, they say under grade 4 you shouldn't have to, but we're not seeing that always, and sometimes the parents bring them irregardless with the mask. So we're seeing variety of things going on, and instead of loosening up for our children so they could have maintain their health.
No, they're sort of given a concentrated dose of authoritarianism. What do you think in a better world than this? How would we deal with the schools? How could we create venues and forums for people to come together and consider the options and consider what's happening and what might happen?
Well, for example, when did our citizens of Lethbridge actually get a chance to talk about masking in schools before it was mandated, right? There should have been, like we used to have forums every once in a while where little groups got together at one of the schools and talked about individual issues. And I don't know if it was done at all in August or September when it was mandated. There's got to be more communication between the parents and bring those students, bring the high school students, bring the middle school students in. They've got views, fantastic views, and they used to be brought in to talk about their education. We want to do what they want to do. It's not just what people up higher, administration wants to do.
And I would like to say something about the actual mask itself and the actual effectiveness of the mask, because our coronavirus is a 0.12 micron. That's what it is in diameter. And these children are wearing a variety of masks. They're wearing them a variety of ways.
When you say 1-2 micron, it's tiny. It's often said that wearing a mask, it's like having a wire fence, to keep out the mosquitoes.
Yes.
We could get at that, but I just, while we're on this issue of how we talk about this and how this is being sent down to us, before leaving that subject, when we talk about when the decision was made for mandatory masks, well, I was, wanting to take part in that decision-making process, and I was dismayed. In Lethbridge, suddenly there's a dictate, you can't sing in the choir anymore, and you can't go to the gym anymore. And the university is going to close down. And all these things were done without any consultation whatsoever. It was just as if the laws changed. You're no longer like citizens with rights and freedoms. You're under the custody of your your wards of the state. And it's been coming at us that way, as if, where are we supposed to give our opinion on this? Where are we supposed to relate to the government on this? They don't create means. Now, there was a little creation of a means where I learned that the city council had decided themselves to dictate on mandatory masking. And I went to the events, like 2 meetings where they discussed it, not, in a public forum. And, issues about religion and presentation of priests, that was brought up. Social distancing that might suffice in workplaces so people wouldn't have to wear masks. But children were not discussed, absolutely not discussed. The schools were absolutely not discussed. And then, of course, the vote took place, and Ryan Parker made a motion. We want to hear from the community. We want to give the people of Lethbridge an opportunity to speak directly to council before the decision is made, rather than making a decision and then labeling everybody who doesn't go along with that decision as somehow dissidents or anti or outliers. So now the decision, I just want to get this out because this really is an issue for the community, that here in Lethbridge we have 4 months from when the decision was made in late August that this mandatory masking applies. And there has been a situation where you say, I'm exempt, and then they're supposed to just allow that, but now Costco, Best Buy, they're changing that and saying, no, everybody has to have a mask or we won't service you. And based on what? Based on what law? Based, who created Costco or Best Buy as lawgivers, as our legislators? This is a form of tyranny. But as this 4-month period comes to an end in December, January, City Council has to decide whether to renew the masking mandate, change it, revise it, for how long. And I've been arguing here repeatedly and in different representations to City Council that hear us this time, create a proper event. If we need to go to NMAX Center or something to have lots of space for social distancing,
Yes.
let's
Yeah,
do
we're
that.
not
Don't
having anything going on there anyhow.
and don't use the excuse that the city council chambers are so small that we can't really do something like that.
Yes.
Include us, because this is what is really becoming dangerous. I think it's dangerous to treat a population this way, where you just say, all this stuff about you having a say, that's in the past now.
Right.
You're underneath us. We're in a height of emergency. Like 10 people have died in Alberta who are not senior citizens, healthy people.
Right.
There's no justification for creating this great big phantom of an emergency, of a health emergency. But in any case, we should be able to discuss that with officials elected to represent us. And they didn't do it last time. They shut us out of the process and then said, especially Murayama said, very mean and pointed things, sort of demeaning anybody who doesn't go along with the decision that they wouldn't let us be part of. So let's somehow work this out.
Yeah, and I think what they're doing is they're pulling back and forth. Someone will say, well, this is a private domain. Like, even when it comes to these
Like,
stores
my
and
face is
issues.
not a private domain.
Yes.
Your face is, if I put my hand on your face, you could probably take me to court. Like,
Yes.
that's a major thing. If it's a little person and you put your hand on their face involuntarily, and yet the state is somehow empowering itself without showing us the evidence,
To silence us.
to muzzle us, and it does appear that part of it is, let's teach children, doesn't matter what you say, you're not important. Just accept to be muzzled, because for the world we're going into, we're going to do robotization, and we're going to have AI, and we're just going to do everything, through machines, and people aren't really that important anymore. So just learn to muzzle yourself, shut up, and
I would be really interested, and I am going to be asking teachers what the students are saying in the classroom. Are they giving the students a chance to talk about their fears? Are they getting a chance to talk about their fears, about themselves, about the children? Are they getting a chance to communicate with the teachers? And I was also going to say that in my opinion, if I was teaching and had to be in this situation, I would not be wearing a mask. I would be wearing a screen so that the children can watch my expressions on my face. And I know as other teachers that are wearing the screens, if they have glasses, it shines on their eyes and it gives them headaches. So, yes, the screens are second best, or to no mask at all, or no covering at all. But And I was going to also say that in a situation that I have heard of, students, high school students, they have water on, they're given their own, they have their own bottles of water on their desk, but they have not been allowed to actually drink that water unless it's a break. They cannot take that mask off and get that water to drink when they need, and this is within a 3-hour period.
Yeah, I read that as well. That, and also the fountains are turned off, so it was easy to go and get your water at a fountain, and you get your water at a fountain, and you get exposed to some other people's, some other bacteria or viruses that you might not have been exposed to, which is good because that's, also young people are building up their immune systems.
Yes.
They're starting from,
Totally
ground zero sort of thing. So it's a very important time for their immune systems. When do we have public health officials talk to us about our immune systems?
Yes.
And the fact that, vaccines tear down our immune systems, ruin our immune systems. And maybe Big Pharma likes it that way. They don't like it if we're able to fend off disease and be healthy. They'd rather us be sickly and you need their products all the time.
Well, the
All about the
aspect
money.
of psychological situations for children, they take such pleasure in relationships. They take such pleasure in responding to other people. They have spontaneous acts of smiling and laughing and hugging, and I think it is some of the pleasantest things we've ever dealt with, even as a teacher. That must be a difficult place to handle the fact that we're actually stymieing their personal expressions and the things that create warmth in their life, and telling them that's wrong when in fact they're beautiful. They're just it's the kindnesses that they've been learned to show, and so the special power that they have with reaching out with people is being taken away from them. They are, as you said, they are treated like they are a lesser than at this point in time. So our children are suffering. Our children are suffering with that, and the whole and it's not. The thing is, it's day and night. This is continual, and there again, that's where with the city hall. This isn't just some issue that's just one minute area. This is something we're dealing with day after day, and everybody's dealing with it, and it's so across the board, and then it's standardized, and yet we have people who can't even move their hands because they're so handicapped. Their hands can't move the mask off. There are people who for years that's how they express themselves, by the facial movements.
Well, yeah.
And it's not there anymore.
Do students, say you're putting your hand up, you want to make a comment in class, can you take your mask off when you talk?
Now, I don't know, but that's a very good question.
Because I noticed, for instance, when we were at the NDP event, I think you were there, and we were, not masked, and we were clearly against certain things like the mandatory vaccine, forcing people to take vaccines. If in Alberta it's already in our law. But you recall that Rachel Notley and Shannon Phillips, their approach was they wore the mask, but then when they were going to speak at the podium, they took their mask off, and then as soon as they stopped speaking, they put their mask back on and stepped aside, and the other spoke. It seems to be, for high-ranking officials, that there's some kind of understanding when you're going to orate that you can take your mask off. So what about extending that to children and letting them know, listen, when you tell us what you're thinking, how you understand this, we're watching all aspects of how you're representing yourself, including your facial expressions, and and the subtleties of your tone of voice, which might be muzzled in masking. I mean, really, this child abuse concept, it just seems to me quite credible that this forms child abuse. If if there was no expectation that young people wear masks in school, you know, where is there any evidence that there's going to be more of the COVID-19 plague, you know? And is the COVID-19 plague, are we just going to get COVID 20, 21, 25, 35? Is it just going to be 20 years? Is this just going to become, like, what's the exit plan? Like, haven't we got far enough into this thing that the deaths are not, you know, you can say the cases are whatever number you want.
Because
And the deaths have been inflated too, because, you know, very few people who die with COVID-19s die of COVID-19. It was like 6%, the CDC said, of those, you know, so the death rates are inflated. The test rates, you know, the cases, this is inflated to create fear, to create uncertainty. And when is it over? Or have we just created a whole class of dependent people who have integrated themselves into this way of life and have no intention of giving it up? And it's very lucrative for some people, the very people that are censoring the internet and whatnot, you know, the Jeff Bezoses and the Zuckerbergs.
The maker of masks. The maker of masks.
Yes, yeah.
And the idea of, you know, if you ruin the middle class, then that's more financial wherewithal and activity for the very rich. And it seems like our whole system, you know, George Soros, Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, like, what is it that now we simply seem to have said, our governments are there for the billionaires, for the multi-billionaires, and they can actually buy public opinion. They can buy TV stations.
Doctors.
They can you know, buy university professors. They can create university department faculties and whatnot. And doctors, you know, doctors are very much integrated already into big pharma and pushing pills. And now what is the situation? Where are the voices in this local area from our doctors? Where are the medical associations having any opinion? No, it's a gravy train. It's a good gravy train for doctors right now.
There's a Doctors for Alliance. Doctors for Alliance, right, is one organization that are talking out.
Freedom, yeah.
World Alliance of Doctors.
World Alliance.
Freedom.
And
It
that
has freedom.
Cahill. And we've seen, you know, in Germany, 1,000 doctors get together, and this happening in Spain. But
Yes.
what
And the
about
White Coat Summit in America
Yeah.
with Dr. Simone Gold, yeah.
Yeah, maybe this is a good moment where we could listen to Hodkinson, Dr. Hodkinson. Now, this is a 5-minute clip, and it's a Cambridge, UK trained physician, a pathologist, member of Royal Societies, and you know, very high-ranking medical expert in his field. And it's interesting that this is a presentation given to the Edmonton City government, to a committee of the Edmonton City government. So there's a process happening in Edmonton. I'm not aware of processes like that happening here in Lethbridge. There should be, and there should be a process to consider what to do with this 4-month mandate, masking mandate. It's not a given that you just, I'm sure many people just think it's a given that we just continue it. Continue it for a year, continue it for 5 years. It's, you know, just it doesn't matter anymore. We're just muzzled, and we're in a, you know, in the Great Reset, as Justin Trudeau says it. But here is Hodgkinson, and let's just listen to this. It's an audio presentation, 5 minutes.
I will call this Community and Public Services Committee meeting to order. It is November 13th, 2020, and this is the edition, which we will begin now. Okay, so we are now moving on to item 6.7, the amendment to extend the temporary mandatory face coverings bylaw. We have. I will call this Community and Public Services Committee meeting to order. It is November 13th, 2020, and this is the edition which we will begin now. Okay, so we are now moving on to item 6.7, the amendment to extend the temporary mandatory face coverings bylaw. We have a number of speakers, and as far as I understand, perhaps some speakers have been added over the break. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? To S. Peterson. S. Peterson.
Mr. Chairman, this is Dr. Hodkinson. I just want to let you know I'm standing by.
Oh, okay. Well, we would love to hear from you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate the opportunity to address you on this very important matter. What I'm going to say is lay language and blunt. It's counter-narrative, and so you don't immediately think I'm a quack. I'm going to briefly outline my credentials so that you can understand where I'm coming from in terms of knowledge base in all of this. I'm a medical specialist in pathology, which includes virology. I trained at Cambridge University in the UK. I'm the ex-president of the pathology section of the Medical Association. I was previously an assistant professor in the Faculty of Medicine doing a lot of teaching. I was the chairman of the Royal College of Physicians of Canada Examination Committee in Pathology in Ottawa. But more to the point, I'm currently the chairman of a biotechnology company in North Carolina selling a COVID-19 test. And you might say I know a little bit about all of this. The bottom line is simply this. There is utterly unfounded public hysteria driven by the media and politicians. It's outrageous. This is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on an unsuspecting public. There is absolutely nothing that can be done to contain this virus, other than protecting older, more vulnerable people. It should be thought of nothing more than a bad flu season. This is not Ebola. It's not SARS. It's politics playing medicine, and that's a very dangerous game. There is no action of any kind needed other than what happened last year when we felt unwell. We stayed home, we took chicken noodle soup, we didn't visit Granny, and we decided when we would return to work. We didn't need anyone to tell us. Masks are utterly useless. There is no evidence base for their effectiveness whatsoever. Paper masks and fabric masks are simply virtue signaling. They're not even worn effectively most of the time. It's utterly ridiculous seeing these unfortunate, uneducated people, I'm not saying that in a pejorative sense, seeing these people walking around like lemmings, obeying without any knowledge base to put the mask on their face. Social distancing is also useless because COVID is spread by aerosols, which travel 30 meters or so before landing. And closures have had such terrible unintended consequences. Everywhere should be open tomorrow, as was stated in the Great Barrington Declaration that I circulated prior to this meeting. And a word on testing. I do want to emphasize that I'm in the business of testing for COVID. I do want to emphasize that positive test results do not, underlined in neon, mean a clinical infection. It's simply driving public hysteria, and all testing should stop unless you're presenting to hospital with some respiratory problem. All that should be done is to protect the vulnerable and to give them all, in the nursing homes that are under your control, give them all 3,000 to 5,000 international units of vitamin D every day, which has been shown to radically reduce the likelihood of infection. And I would remind you all that using the province's own statistics, the risk of death under 65 in this province is 1 in 300,000. 1 in 300,000. You've got to get a grip on this. The scale of the response that you're undertaking, with no evidence for it, is utterly ridiculous, given the consequences of acting in a way that you're proposing. All kinds of suicides, business closures, funerals, weddings, etc., etc. It's simply outrageous. It's just another bad flu. And you've got to get your minds around that. Let people make their own decisions. You should be totally out of the business of medicine. You're being led down the garden path by the Chief Medical Officer of Health for this province. I'm absolutely outraged that this has reached this level. It should all stop tomorrow. Thank you very much.
I will call this Community and Public Services Committee meeting to order. It is November 13th, 2020, and this is the edition, which we will begin now. Okay, so we are now moving on to item 6.7, the amendment to extend the temporary mandatory face coverings bylaw. We have a number of speakers, and as far as I understand, perhaps some speakers have been added over the break. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? To S. Peterson. S. Peterson.
Mr. Chairman, this is Dr. Hodkinson. I just want to let you know I'm standing by.
Oh, okay. Well, we would love to hear from you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I do appreciate the opportunity to address you on this very important matter. What I'm going to say is lay language and blunt.
Okay, well, the doctor indicated you can't contain this, and in any case it's no more serious than the annual flu rates, and he makes it very clear masking doesn't do anything, and it has negative sides to it and no positive sides to speak for it. Rita, we're getting towards the end of our time here. I think you have some thoughts about phys ed. Phys ed was your love, what you studied in university, when they called it phys ed, now they call it the Department of Kinesiology at the University of Lethbridge. And especially in these times of such high tension, phys ed and playing and letting off some steam and having some fun and maybe even getting physical together. This kind of thing is maybe more important than ever for young people in schools.
Yeah.
Do you have some thoughts?
So the
on
one
that?
question that I would always ask the children, what's your favorite class? It was always phys ed, because they were able to get out there and scream, outside, to scream their lungs off and run as fast as they could and challenge each other to races, and it was so enlightening to see children just come out of their shells and be able to be themselves in phys ed class. And that's why I love teaching it so much, because it showed me a different side of the children. Now, I have not been in the classrooms this year, so I don't know. But I've heard that even recesses, some schools have the children standing in one spot at recesses because they don't want to be mixing and mingling. Like the fantastic equipment outside on the playgrounds now are absolutely amazing that they have built in the last 2 years. Well, are the children being able to get in there and intermingle and socialize? I don't think so. But I mean, after school, I think they could do that if their parents are allowed them to go in and experience things that they're not being able to experience at school. So that's one of my biggest concerns. And then also is the earlier grades losing out on some of the opportunities they have to express themselves.
Yeah, we should develop a way for people to communicate with us. I guess that might be ahead, but we do have an organization developing. We are in a group. We've all met each other on Mayor McGrath when we were carrying placards and
Yes.
signs, and they call us anti-maskers. I think there's a lot of positive things that we're for. We're not just against things. So this need to organize and to exchange information and get to know who are the people who are concerned about these issues and who wants to make a mark about these issues. And do we go like lambs to the slaughter, or do we say, no way, I'm not a child. I'm responsible for what I say, for what I think. I take responsibility for it, and I want to be treated like an adult too, and stop treating us like children, transforming the world into your awards. Do you have any final thoughts, Melinda?
Well, my thought is the children are suffering. I mean, they need more oxygen than we need. They're not little adults. They, when they're 6 and under, it's approximately 2 times. I mean, these figures are coming from the WHO organization, and then it's 3 times when they're 6 years old and up for a period of time and until they mature. Well, these masks are not offering them that opportunity. They're fragile in terms of their respiratory systems. They have smaller tubes. They're more likely to get congested. Are we considering these things? And are the teachers taught to watch for these signs of children and what's going on with them? And I think there's a lot of things that are not being addressed. And I think this across the board simplicity is not an advanced society, and I think it's becoming more draconian and medieval in its nature.
Yeah, and it turns out that the real health impacts are coming not from COVID-19, but from the lockdowns, which deprive people of their livelihood, which deprive people of their capacity to, pay their mortgage. You have suicides, at very unusually high rates of suicides, and these lockdowns, the full economic impact takes a while. You don't lose your house right away. So if they lock us down again, it's going to be devastating. And this sort of money created out of nowhere by private bankers who create the money and then charge interest on it. It's creating an indebted society, a chronically indebted society. So the suicides, the domestic violence, the child abuse,
the loneliness,
the child abuse that happen in these lockdowns. This is an emerging subject. The addictions. One of the things that you come out of this U.S. election is the opioid crisis, which is right here in Lethbridge. People seek ways out of despair and impossible situations. I see people walking around Lethbridge who don't look to me like the homeless that I've seen in the past, who are carrying their possessions around in carts. And I ask myself, are these people who fell out of the system, in the last lockdowns? Don't lock us down. Don't you dare, don't you dare under these conditions. It just seems there's a spirit in the land of officialdom, a certain type of officialdom that just wants to show us who's boss. Don't do that to us, or take the consequences. So I think we'll call it a day. And we'll see you next week, Melinda, and we'll keep you posted. And this is an introduction to the subject, but hopefully it just opens up further discussion.
I would like to talk to child psychologists in the system and teachers.
Yeah, and why shouldn't we be able to talk about these things in our community in a poised way, with an idea that we're adults, we're entitled to our point of view on issues, and that needs to be
Yes.
respected, and we need to get used to talking about these matters and not simply ceding our power over to nameless officials that don't seem to be treating their
Yeah,
their
pro ideas, pro
responsibilities well.
ideas.
Use your voice, use your
Yeah.
voice.
Okay, use your voice on that. See you later.